Hi everyone, I'm the plant propagator and welcome to my channel. Today it is mid-December. It's a beautiful day, partly cloudy, 81 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just a little bit of a breeze. This is a great day. What I wanted to do today is show you my orchid growing space and explain to you how I treat my plants in this space and how they're shaded and watered. There's some questions that come up as far as orchids grow. The two main questions and the two main things that you got to be concerned about is light and watering. So what I wanted to do is show you my space and show you how those plants are treated. And that again is sunlight and water. And so I can go into that in some detail. There's questions about, you have a pool right over there, and there's questions about, do I grow orchids in my pool cage? And the answer is no. Everything is outside of the pool cage, everything is exposed, and that's just how I grow my orchids. I can show you what I want to do today is show you my pergola space, which is right here, and I put this pergola together in a very specific way for my orchids. I call it my orchid pergola. I want to show you the orchids that are growing along my fence over here. And again, these orchids are placed under certain conditions that is, I think, optimal or as good as I'm going to get for growing of these plants. And I got different orchids that are in different places on this. And then finally, what I'm going to do is show you my nursery space, and that is back there underneath the bougainvillea. So there's shade from the bougainvillea, which disappeared after Hurricane Ian came through. That plant was completely defoliated. It's growing back. It provides the proper amount of shade right now. So I've got plants under there, and those are my I call that, some of that space, my nursery. I also have some plants that are growing behind the shed back there. That's also part of my nursery, and I can show you those plants and how those are sunlit, and how those are treated. Okay, so what I want to do in order to give you more information is get behind the camera and show you these spaces and kind of give you an overview of how those spaces are organized. Okay, so let me get behind the camera. Okay, I am now behind the camera, and this is my pergola. And as you can see, my orchid pergola is outside of the pool cage. And this, I made this out of 4x4s and 2x4s and 2x6s on top. The most critical thing on this orchid pergola is up at the top, and that's the shade cloth. So most orchids don't do well in direct sun, and so they need to be shaded in various ways. And you see in a lot of places that people use a black shade cloth. This material is aluminette, and this is a little more expensive, but this is a kind of a metallic covered or a metallic shade cloth. It's not made out of metal. I mean, it's a metallic fabric, that colored fabric that I placed on top of this pergola. And there are different shade percentages that you can buy of this aluminate. And for cattleyas, which is the main thing that I grow, it's a 50% shade cloth. So you can see this runs along the whole top of this thing. It looks nice, I think, and it provides just the right amount of light for the cattleyas. Now, as you go down here, the orchids on the top are going to be shading a little bit the orchids on the bottom. So maybe the orchids on the bottom, you have to have some that might tolerate a little bit lower light on the bottom. And as you get more light, you go up into the top. The thing that you need to keep in mind when you're growing orchids and when you're growing plants outside is, of course, the sunlight right now. Today, the sun is going back behind the clouds and then coming out. And it's also December, which means the sun is pretty low in the sky. So this is at the north end of my pool cage, and the sun is up in the southern sky right now. So it actually, in order for this to get sunlight to shine on my orchids on the bottom, it goes through 2 layers of screening that's in my pool cage. And again, what that ends up being is about 50% shading. So even though the shade cloth is just on top, if there were no pool cage over here, the plants that are underneath, because of the angle of the sun, would be getting direct sunlight. Even though it's December, it's too much sun for a lot of these orchids. So they like getting the shade from the net, from the screen on the pool cage. So again, 2 layers of this pool cage screening gives you about the same amount of shading as the 50% aluminate shade cloth on the top. All right, so that's really the main thing on the pool cage here. Now in the summertime, the sun will be directly overhead, which means that the aluminate that's on top will shade most of the plants. Maybe the ones that are sticking out will get a little bit too much direct light, and so those I'll actually put behind there, but put a little bit more underneath the pergola. But you got to keep in mind when you're growing plants that direct sun is really too much for most of these orchids, and you have to keep them in shades. You know, in the wild, they grow in trees under canopy, so they like filtered light. And this is kind of what you try to do outside here in Southwest Florida, is you can hang them in trees or you put them underneath some type of shading. And again, what most people do in Southwest Florida and South Florida is they grow the orchids inside the pool cage. But as you can see, I have no orchids inside my pool cage. Okay, so moving on a little bit, the other thing that I do want to show you, and I do want to explain to you, and it's kind of hard to see, we'll see if I can zoom in on it, but there is irrigation, and I don't know if you'll be able to see that or not, but there is irrigation right there. So I have an irrigation head that comes up from the ground. So all of the orchids underneath this pergola get irrigated 3 times a week, and they get irrigated along with my yard, but I have a different zone called the Orchid zone, where these will just get irrigated, and I use well water. A lot of times people say well water is not good for orchids, but in this area apparently it's fine, I think. I mean, my orchids are doing okay. Okay, so that's pretty much explains the pergola growing space that I wanted to go over first. Now I'm going to shift gears and we're going to look over here on the orchids growing on my fence, and I've got all these orchids growing on my fence. I do have some, you can see there's a nice vanda growing on this tree right here. There's another vanda growing right here on this tree, and I do have that. But the thing is about all of these orchids growing along the fence here, and it's where I have a lot of them, and you can't tell right now, the sun will come out a little bit as soon as it comes from behind the clouds, but these are all growing on the fence. And what you can't see is that I have palm trees right here that are shading the orchids that are growing on the fence. And it's about, so the palm trees are on the south side of the fence, so the sun, even in the wintertime, and we're getting some sun now that's peeking out from the clouds, but you can see most of these orchids get what's called dappled sunlight, kind of filtered sunlight. Some of them, when you look at them, some of them may be getting direct sun, but if they do, it doesn't last for long as the sun moves through the sky. So most of these are getting light from the sun that is filtered through the palm leaves, and you can get a good idea. Right here you can see the palm leaves kind of waving in the wind. At least you can see the sunlight, I think. Hopefully you can see the sunlight reflecting through the palm leaves, and how that kind of moves back, how those leaves move back and forth. And again, maybe some of the lower plants on the fence here are getting a little bit more sunlight because of the angle of the sun. This one right back Here, for example, looks like it's getting full sun, but it'll move into the shade soon. So they can handle a little bit of sun, and that's fine. But most of them will get filtered sunlight, and that's what they like, is bright filtered light. The other thing that I want to show you here is that I do have irrigation, and you might not be able to see it very well, but there's an raised irrigation head right there. So as my orchids in my pergola are being watered, these orchids on the fence are also being watered by these raised irrigation heads. Again, 3 days a week, and then a 4th day of the week I will fertilize. So these are getting a lot of light, and they're getting good amounts of water. So I think they're doing pretty well here. Okay, so moving on. Oh, and I do want to show you, let's go back over and look at, so there's some Vandas right here on this. These Vandas are getting a lot of light. Everyone tells me Vandas need a lot of light and a lot of water. So that's what I'm trying to do with these guys. So that, you know, that's in full sun, not quite full sun, but that gets a lot of light. You know, these guys over here too are getting a lot of light. Here, and I got to show you, got to come back over here, because, yay, this is a Rhynchostylis gigantea, and this is going to bloom soon, and it's stuck on the tree. You know, monster roots growing out of the bottom of them there, and if you follow down the tree, lots there. I may miss this. I may not be here for this, but again, these are growing. They're getting a lot of light. They're doing well. The root systems on these guys are really growing pretty well. As you kind of climb up the tree, you can see the root systems on this Vanda. Most of them are from this Vanda right here that hasn't bloomed. I've only had this for a short time, but it hasn't bloomed since I've had it. This Rhynchostylis is going to be blooming, I think, pretty soon. Okay, so let me take a look back at my nursery space, which is right here. So this is shelves, and I've got Vandas, I've got Dendrobiums on the top of the shelf because they're under the shade of this bougainvillea here. So this bougainvillea that was really destroyed by the hurricane, it's growing back like crazy. It's really doing quite well. So it's growing back. The dens that are up in here are just loving it. They're doing pretty well. So but they're on the top shelf, and they tend to get buried back in the dendrobium, or back in the bougainvillea here. So all those are dens up on the top shelf. There's seedlings, there's other plants, there's, you know, new spikes forming. There's a lot of activity here. But this is a really shaded spot because I'm sitting underneath one of the palm trees on one side, and then dendrobium on the other side, the palm tree on one side and the bougainvillea on the other side. And so it's a pretty shaded space, and I have some of my sensitive seedlings that I grow in this space. So these are, again, this is my nursery space right here. You can see a sea of tags there, and as you go down to my bottom shelf, more seedlings out of flasks that are here, not the dendrobium that's blooming. I'd be excited if that. I haven't seen my first dendrobium bloom from seed, but some of the plants that are in the back here are pretty big, so I'm hoping to get some blooms on some of those plants that I grew from seed in the back. And again, so this is my nursery space. This is also, these plants are also irrigated by this sprinkler head right here, and this really gets a lot of different plants all over the space, all over the place here. Okay, so I want to show you a little bit more, and it's a little tight where we're going, but more of my nursery space here. And this is really shaded behind my shed. So in the wintertime, which is what it is now here, believe it or not, there's no sun. The sun is too low in the sky, so the sun can't, and this is a northern exposure, so the sun doesn't get back here. But in the summertime, the sun will reach back here, and hopefully the bougainvillea will grow back over the shed again, so that it won't be too sunny back here. But so some of the phals I keep here. Look at this straggler. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. He's a long way away from where he should be. You know, maybe they like orchids. Maybe he'll form a chrysalis over here. Okay, anyway, he's big enough to. Anyway, so there's some of the nursery plants there, along with some phals, and looks like I got a den back here too. And then this is more of my nursery plants here. We'll take a look at them a little closer so you can see how they look. But more of the nursery babies right there, and then moving down to this shelf, yet more of, so these are some Certipodiums and some new encyclias that I just put here yesterday. So I'm getting a little, well, I'm not getting a little, I'm very tight on nursery space, so I need to come up with a way to offload some of these plants, and I got a lot of them. So there's some new hybrids that I have that I've made, and there are some Florida natives that are in here. There's a whole range of things. Bottom shelf here again there's some phals down there. There's also irrigation. I put some irrigation that is up on my, so there's an irrigation head right there that's mounted to the back of my shed, and these get also irrigated 3 days a week. So that's all I wanted to share with you, is my orchid growing space and how it's watered and irrigated, and how it's taken care of, and how I'm really careful with putting these plants out here, and what kind of sun they get, and even what time of the year it is that will affect the angle of the sun and where these plants are located. So it's not a question of just, putting these things out and forgetting about them. I do take care of my plants. Okay, and I'll end up here where we started, which was the orchid pergola. All right. That's all I have for today. If you liked what you saw today and you want to keep on seeing my videos, it would help me out if you could click on like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. All right. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and happy propagating.